Hello, George?
Yeah, hi.
Hi, how are you? It's Danny Lobell.
Yeah, Danny, I'm doing all right.
And it's an honor to be talking to you.
Thank you.
George, you've been doing comedy forever, and you're a legend and respected by every comedian. Now, I have a lot of questions for you. You've done 13 specials. How did you start that relationship with HBO?
Here's the deal. Back in 1977, that's the year I did my first HBO special. I did another one the following year. My career had, gone into overdrive in 1972 with the release of the first Little David album. And that was FM and AM, and then came Class Clown, Occupation Fool, Toledo Window Box. Those four went gold. Then there were two more that weren't quite gold albums, but they're pretty good and everything, but they didn't quite sell at that level. So
right.
I was not the hot new guy anymore, and the world was changing. The end of the hippie era, free love, call it whatever you want, sexual revolution, youth movement, counterculture, all that shit. that had just faded, and disco had taken over the popular culture, and so life was changing in the culture, and I had to run out of my initial burst of energy creatively. Mm-hmm. So I kind of drifted a little bit creatively within myself for a while. And I did Carson shows a lot. I did so far I've done about 135 or something Tonight shows. But the thing is this: HBO, the albums, the record albums, gave me a mass market, a way to reach a mass market, a nationwide market. Whereas the concerts were very limited. You'd have 3,000 people, 4,000. And they would all talk to each other, but it's not like the same thing. So the albums were my way of reaching the mass. And then when that began to fade, HBO came along. Mm-hmm. And although they didn't have the subscribership that they have now, they had a lot of people. And I was able to build and continue to my relationship with the mass audience through HBO.
Right.
So that's where it came in, right when it was needed.
Now, your most recent special that you did, Life is Worth Losing, was a little bit grimmer than any of the other specials we've seen from you.
Well, yeah, one of my favorite things to do is to find out where people's sensitive areas are, find out the hot spots, or the hot buttons, or whatever you want to call them. I like talking about things that make people uneasy, because it's fun to get them kind of tensed up a little, and wondering where you're going to go with this, because they know it's a sensitive topic, and then to show them how it's okay,
right,
to talk about it, to laugh about it, to think about it even. Mm-hmm. So what I do is, just by my example of the material, is to kind of take them on a guided tour, in this particular show more than the others, on a guided tour of the danger zones,
Right.
They're their own personal cultural danger zones, which are mostly artificially instituted in them anyway by the culture, and the religion and the government and the expected kind of behaviors we have. So I like breaking down all those walls. And as you know, even before this show, I've done that on a different kind of level, different other subjects.
But is there ever a time when you've done a bit and you felt, maybe I've gone a little too far with this? I don't know if they're understanding me. I don't know if they're feeling me.
Well, you know what? I don't really care if they understand me or feel me. I do this for myself.
Right.
This is for me, and if I get people to come along with me, that's a big bonus. And I can't exist without them, ultimately, in the long term, coming along with me. But now that I'm fully established in a long-term way,
right,
I don't have to worry about maybe alienating some people, because as many as I might alienate at this point, I would pick up that same number of new people,
right,
because that's just the way it works. And HBO, one of the values of HBO is that it cuts through all of the lines of age, education, race, income, neighborhood. All of these demographic things that separate us are non-existent when it comes to the HBO audience.
Right.
And that is why the concert audiences that you see, that I see at my shows, or anyone else would see, range from 15 years of age to people in their 50s and 60s.
Right.
And it's always been that way. I've always picked up more people. People have said to me, well, how's that audience? Have they stayed with you? And I say, I don't know. It doesn't bother. I don't care. I just, what I do, whoever's interested can come along, and that's fine. And I have a thing that I say sometimes when I'm talking to an audience like in Las Vegas, where they're notoriously crappy audiences.
Right.
And you do feel like you're talking to the wall some of the time because they're just too stupid or too frightened or whatever it is.
Right.
And I often say to them, I say, listen, I don't give a shit if you like this stuff or not, because frankly, the audience doesn't figure into my plans. Mm-hmm. And I say this, which always gets a nice laugh. Right. I look at it this way. You're here for me, I'm here for me, and no one's here for you. And that just breaks down some of that tension, you know?
Your act has evolved so much over the years. I've watched some of your really early stuff,
right,
and stuff you did in the '60s, the Hippy Dippy Weatherman. I love that bit. Do you think over the years you've gotten angrier, or is it just you've always felt the same way, but you've just over the years been able to come out with it more? Well,
there's a couple of things I got to remember in giving you this answer, and it's kind of long. There's a couple of layers here. Remind me to come back to the word anger, okay? And then the word artist. There's a lot of things. First of all, I'm very out of step with everything. I've never felt like I belonged to anything. The church, I guess as a young kid, a little kid, I had some of that. I guess I had a little bit of I'm an American stuff when I was a little kid and still naive. But for the most of my adult life and the memory I have, I've never really felt a part of this country or a part of this, my religion that was given to me, or even of my species. I don't identify with my species. Abraham Maslow said, the truly realized man does not identify with the local group. And I do not identify with the local group, which is my fellow man or my neighborhood or my profession. I don't hang out with comedians. I'm not a spokesman for comedy or anything. I'm just kind of do my thing, and I'm friendly. I'm a friendly person. From the anger standpoint, so being out of step like that has made me at odds with everything there is pretty much out there in the culture, whether it's the serious culture or the pop culture. So we'll put that up as a starter that I don't agree. I do not conform. I do not agree. Then add the fact that artists are on a journey usually. I mean, I know that I'm an entertainer, and it's a lesser place than artist. And I know that I'm a stand-up comic, and that's considered kind of a low rung on the totem pole. I don't mind any of those things. I'm a stand-up comic, and I'm an entertainer. But some of us are also artists. There are entertainers only. There are artist entertainers. And I think an artist is moving and growing and in pursuit of something that he really doesn't understand or know. You can't put your finger on it. All artists, composers, choreographers, dancers. Dancers are interpretive artists usually, but purely creative, the writer, the composer. Those people have something that propels them, and they're never satisfied. So that, I think, is alive in me and has pushed me forward to find more things in myself to say about what I see and hear around me. The third thing to remember is I have never really had much anger in my personal life. I don't have a temper. I can get irritated like anyone else. I can get frustrated like anyone else. But I don't live with anger. Anyone who's been around me for any appreciable length of time probably has never seen me lose my temper or lash out at anyone. You can get into arguments at home, and that's a little bit different. You know, you're at close quarters with a mate, with a wife or a husband or something, and you're going to have things that you have to express. But generally speaking, I am pretty mellow and at ease with everyone. And anyone met me on the street would tell you I'm accessible, I'm friendly, I always have a good word and a smile, and I ask what your name is and all that shit.
Mm-hmm.
So there's no anger here. The thing they see on stage that seems angry is my irritation, my dissatisfaction, my disenchantment with all the shit that these two entities have shown me. These two entities are the species that I belong to and the culture that I belong to. I think each of them have squandered great gifts that were given to them. The species was given the gift of communication and the ability to cooperate and compete in some sort of balance that would make the species move forward, thrive. Mm-hmm. Well, competition and cooperation have gotten out of balance. We don't cooperate as well anymore. We mostly compete. And I think we've let God and the cash register get in the way of everything that's important. The same thing is true of this culture here. We were given these great freedoms and this great philosophy and theory of self-government and democracy, and we turned it all over to the money traders and the high priests. People are just driven by these religious superstitions, by the pursuit of goods, the pursuit of money, and therefore power, and it's just completely out of balance. It's life out of balance, as the Hopi Indians would say.
Right.
And that is what gets me a little irritated about what happened. I feel betrayed by my culture, betrayed by my species. So that reads as anger on a stage because you have to heighten everything on a stage for theatrical purposes anyway. So it seems like I'm an angry guy.
Right.
That's my answer.
Wow, thanks.
Yeah.
Now, when I met you with Jackie Mason,
yeah,
I heard you say to him that you feel he's one of the greatest 3 comics of all time.
Yeah.
Who are the other 2?
Well, one time when I saw him years ago on the street, and he had not started his Broadway phase yet. In other words, the most important part of his career hadn't even really started yet. I had known him from his first surge, mm-hmm. and his television days, and then when he went into a little bit of an eclipse, I would follow him. I saw him at a club in Santa Monica and stuff, and I always told him, I always said to him that. I always said, you're one of my top 5 or one of my top 3 or something like that. And I don't know who the others are. I just know there's a very small group that I think are the best. And so after telling him for years that, you're one of my top 3, he said, let me ask you a question. He says, who are these other people? Can you give me the names of these other people, please? So I don't know who they are. Obviously, I love Lenny Bruce and Richard Pryor, what they did.
Right.
But Jackie Mason is just very special, and I don't know. I guess if I had a half an hour and a pencil and a paper, I could sit and come up with a nice list of 10 people. I think Woody Allen's brain is great. I could come up with a list of 10 people who I thought were just in my book, I would go back and listen to over and over. Red Fox is one of them. Right. There's just maybe 10 or 15 of them. And then the list tends to want to get a little bigger. A guy like Louis Black comes along, mm-hmm. and Mitch Hedberg, who's gone now, but who had such a good head. I like Stephen Wright, Mm-hmm. But when it comes to year in, year out, more and more, and stuff that you can count on, Jackie Mason is one of those kind of guys.
Right.
And every time I see him in person, I ask him to do Ed Sullivan, and man, when he does Frank Sinatra, that's so fucking. He's so physical that he doesn't need to be. He's an accomplished verbal comic. His ideas are great. His politics are not all the same politics I have, but he expresses them beautifully, and he finds the truth in it. Mm-hmm. And then on top of that, he can do physical things, and he works an audience too.
Right.
Mister, are you listening? Tell the truth, Mister. Are you a homosexual? I just always loved that shit when he just stops the show. And I know what he's doing. He's vamping.
Right.
And that's okay.
People don't even know to the extent that he can do it. Like, he can do impressions of guys you'd never imagine. I can name almost any old-time stand-up comic to him.
I'll bet you.
He could do a perfect impression of them.
I wouldn't be surprised.
It's amazing.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I'll tell you a story about Jackie Mason and me. When I was with my partner, Burns and Carlin, we were a team, Burns and Carlin.
Right.
In our first year, we only spent 2 years together, 1960 to, from the middle of 60 to the middle of 62. And one of the things we did when we were in the New York area was to work a club date, a one-night club date, for a dinner for a special kind of audience,
Right.
That's what they call, I don't know if they still call them club dates, a one-nighter. Yeah, we got $50 for this thing at the St. George Hotel in Brooklyn, and the group was the Brooklyn Gas Merchants. And Jackie Mason was on ahead of us.
Right.
And he was somewhat beginning to be known, but he had nowhere near, I think, even reached his first peak. And one of the things that Burns and Carlin did in our act, I imitated. Jack and I did Huntley and Brinkley and Nixon and Kennedy.
Yeah.
And he did Huntley interviewing me as Kennedy. But Jackie Mason we were standing behind the curtain, and we liked Jackie, and he was on before us, and we're listening. He stayed on a long time, naturally, which is murder. It just kills you. Mm-hmm. He was the accomplished performer. We were not. Right. We did little, cute little skits. And he launched into his Kennedy to close with. Mm-hmm. And it was, perfect. And the lines were funny and everything. So we came on, and we were a big anticlimax, to say the least. And that was my first taste of Jackie, and it involved one of his great impressions, in this case, Kennedy.
I remember you used to do a lot of impressions in your act when you were starting out. I saw an old clip of you on the Mike Douglas show. Yeah. When John Lennon and Yoko Ono were co-hosting.
Yeah. And one of the things I did in order to break the ice in a nightclub when I'd be working was to open, because I knew that nobody knew me, or maybe one person had seen me on TV and says, "Oh, I know that guy," but nobody knew me. I would say, when you're a new comedian, you have to figure out what style of comedian you want to be. And I said, there's a lot of different things, a lot of different kind of people. I said, first of all, there's the old-timers like Jackie Leonard, and I would do about 3 or 4 jokes of Jackie Leonard type things. Mm-hmm. Then I would say, and then there are the newer people like Mort Saul, and I did this great Mort Saul. And I did a good Shelley Berman, and I did a good Lenny Bruce. So those, not everyone knew who Lenny Bruce was, of course, but in those kind of clubs, a lot of people did.
What year was it?
This was 1960, let's start in April 62 through about 65.
And you also started out doing radio.
Yeah.
And what I found is that stand-up and radio, for me, really worked together. Like, I'd come up with these great ideas on the air, and then I'd say, hey, let me go back to that and work on it as a bit.
Yeah, good.
And did you get a lot of your stand-up through radio?
Well, when I was a little kid, I decided I'd be a disc jockey first and a comedian second, and then become an actor like Danny Kaye, a comic actor. So that was my plan when I was 11 years old. So for me, it was being a disc jockey. And I became a DJ when I was about 18. Mm-hmm. And that lasted 4 years after, and then I met Jack Burns, and we started into comedy. So it didn't quite work the way I planned it, although basically it did. It didn't work specifically. The radio was a stepping stone, a way of getting confident at a young age, perfecting a kind of a verbal style, just to hear myself speaking and be sure-footed on my feet, verbally, and to be able to think quickly. And I had a little bit of chance to be a personality on the air. It wasn't a formula radio station. But not really. I was keeping a small file of ideas even then, but I wasn't working toward being a comedian at that time. I was trying to get into the largest radio market I could. I wanted to be a big-time DJ so that it would set me up to become a comedian. I don't know. I was a kid when I was 11 when I planned all this. So I stayed with the simplistic plan longer than I needed to, or I tried to stay with it longer than I needed to, because events changed, and I found out I couldn't really act. I didn't really care for it. I wasn't good at it. I was scared shitless. I didn't have any style, any technique, or any kind of training. And the other thing was coming easy to me, the comedy.
Right.
So I found out I was really, stage 2 was really where I belonged as a comedian.
Right. Well, George, one more question.
All right.
What advice would you give to comedians who are working today to try and become even a part as successful as you?
Well, the only way is you have to be true to yourself, and you have to remember that they're there for you. You're not there for them. It really depends on what level of recognition and development you're at. If you're really, really new, the main thing is to find an audience as often as you can. Mm-hmm. Keep doing it, because you have to learn to play the trumpet before anybody's going to put you in the band. And the only way to learn to play the trumpet is practicing, and the only way you can practice comedy is in front of an audience. Mm-hmm. So you have to get out and just fail. And I always remembered one thing. When I was in my first year or two as a single, and I would have a crappy night and have to ride all the way home on the subway from Greenwich Village to my home uptown. Mm-hmm. I would console myself by saying, well, yeah, but Friday night they loved it. Friday night was great. So what do these people know? Always remember, the audience is always wrong. That's what I believe. The audience is always wrong when they don't like you, because you have all those other nights when it worked.
Right.
So you have to count on that. Right. Go with the good.
Thank you so much, George. It's really been an honor talking to you.
It's my pleasure.
If you're in New York, let me know.
I will. Now, I have this number I have is not your number, right, but I have your 516 number.
Right.
Okay, I'll call you.
Thanks so much, George.
Okay, man.
Have a good day.
Bye-bye.